So in 2012, my youngest son George, who was 1 at the time, passed away very suddenly. He was playing at home on the rug of the playroom, and he suddenly had a fit out of the blue. So we called an ambulance. The ambulance came and rushed him to our local A&E department, where within 2 hours he passed away. The doctors and nurses were amazing, but completely baffled how this healthy child just died so suddenly. And really did look after us with the facilities and with what they could at the time. We left the hospital, and for the following days we heard from nobody. We were just abandoned basically as a family, and when you lose a child, when you lose anyone suddenly and traumatically out of the blue, to then be left alone to try and deal with it just was completely baffling. 5 days after my son George died, leaving myself and Holly and Isaac, my other 2 children, completely traumatised. My husband, Paul, this most amazing man who just dedicated his whole life to me and the children, just couldn't cope with what had happened and took his own life. And we were still just completely left. We received no support whatsoever. We were visited by professionals, but more of a investigatory kind of way. And yeah, that's what happened. And I think when you have 3 children under 3, which is what I had, and you have so much support when you give birth to a child, when one dies, in our eyes, nobody cared about George or our family. And the same thing happened when my husband passed away as well. So it's been a really, really difficult 5 years just to sort of come to terms with our loss, but also to start trying to move forward in some way. As I said, the staff, when George died, the staff were amazing. They really did sit with us. They cried. They were open about their emotions. They asked if we wanted his handprints taken, if we wanted his curls taken, which we did, but they had nothing in that unit for that to happen. They managed to get some stuff together. They took his handprints, but they used red paint, which I think is probably the worst colour possible in an A&E department. They cut his curls, stuck it in a white envelope with a leaflet with some phone numbers on, which after a time I looked into it and they were actually out of date, some of them. And that was it. We then just left. We were supposed to see somebody the following day, but that person actually didn't even turn up to the appointment with us. And that's all we had to remember George, really. Because of the short gap between both their deaths, there was a lot of police involvement. They were unsure if this was a father who was traumatised by losing his son, or was this a father who may have hurt his son. So there was a lot of police involvement. And again, they were lovely, but there was no system in place through the police or the health boards to support our family in any way, emotionally. So you do feel very worthless. The feelings of worthlessness stay with you for a long, long time and remain with me today. But that is really all we received. We didn't receive anything, and the GP did come out to see us, but he's not qualified in sort of bereavement support as such, which he admitted. He was wonderful and lovely, but nobody could point us in the right direction. And we had to Google places that we could get help. A lot of these places we never heard back from, and it's not what you expect, I suppose. But then when you don't go through it very often, thankfully, you don't know what is out there. So that was 5.5 years ago. Yeah, so it took me a long time to leave the house. It took me nearly 8 months to leave the house. I didn't drive for a year. I was a PE teacher at the time, and I dipped back into work as much as I could, but my mind just wasn't on it really. And Paul was they both were, but Paul was just this incredible man who should be here today to see his other 2 children grow up. I always say that children do pass away. You never want it to be yours, but sadly it was. But Daddy should not walk out the house and never come home. And I wanted to do something for him more than anything. He always wanted to help others when he was here, and I wanted that to continue even though he'd gone. So actually I wanted to make a difference where George died. The family facilities were completely non-existent. We said goodbye to George in a closed children's ward after walking his body down the main corridor of a hospital. That's not appropriate, and I know all of these things contributed to my husband's death. It's a roller coaster. Paul was my best friend, my rock. He was the best father anyone could have asked for their children, and when he was there one minute and taken the next, for me my life was over, and it was over as I knew it. And people told me that time heals and it would be okay. And yeah, it does. You know, time does heal. It makes things a little easier, definitely, but it's something you will live with for the rest of your life. And for me, the last 5 years has been about learning to live with it and how I move forward without forgetting, because the one thing I don't want to do is forget them. I don't want to forget the smells. I don't want to forget, you know, everything about them, their voices and everything along those lines. So for me, it's been trying to get the balance right of remembering them and still thinking about them, which I do all the time, but also, you know, making a new life for myself and the children. You know, I'm not proud to admit I've not been there for my children as much as I want to be. They've had an amazing 5 years as far as they're concerned, but I've just not wanted to be a family with them. I've just wanted to exist and get through the days and the weeks. And only recently, probably the last 6 months, so 5 years on, I feel I'm starting to get back on my feet again. Do I stop thinking about them? No. Do I still feel guilty for being here and enjoying life? Yeah, very much so. But then I look at Holly and Isaac and I know that Paul and George are living on there, and we owe it to them to live our lives for them as well now. So every day we do that.